So, if you're watching this, then you already know what's up. I had the incredible opportunity to sit down for an interview with Rob Renzetti, an absolute animation legend. The rest of the world probably knows Rob best for creating the series My Life as a Teenage Robot, but he's also worked on like a gazillion other shows. He's worked on Dexter's Laboratory, he's directed episodes of Samurai Jack, he's worked on episodes of the Powerpuff Girls, and, of course, he was supervising producer for Gravity Falls. He also helped co-write Journal 3, which is probably the book I've read more than any book on God's green earth. I have a very unhealthy obsession with Stanford Pines. Alex Hirsch has said in DVD commentary and in the interview that I've released on this channel with Alex Hirsch that Rob Renzetti was such a big part in Ford's characterization. Aside from co-writing on Journal 3, Rob Renzetti has also written a book of his own, The Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, which I am currently low-key obsessed with. It's a really cool book, and if you haven't read it, you definitely should. We're going to try to avoid spoilers, but I will say that the first half of this interview is dedicated to The Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, and then the rest of it is all about Gravity Falls, Journal 3, Ford's characterization, etc. And I know that the majority of my fans are Gravity Falls fans, but I'm telling you, definitely don't skip the first few questions, because even if you haven't read Horrible Bag of Terrible Things, Rob Renzetti goes into a lot of detail on the writing process, the publishing process, the process behind choosing a VA for narration, for audiobooks, the process of finding inspiration for the cover design, for the art, for the ideas, for the characters, etc. And honestly, if you're just someone who's interested in writing, or writing a book of your own, which I, in theory, am, if I ever get 10 goddamn minutes to myself, I might actually finish a book. But if you're someone who has any interest in literature at all, or in that process, I definitely recommend listening to those questions, because Rob gave some really insightful answers, and they were just really interesting. The last thing I'll note is that Rob Renzetti was possibly the kindest man on earth. He was just an absolute joy to sit down with. He answered all of my questions to the best of his ability, and it was just really nice to chat with him and talk about Stanford Pines. Rob, thank you very much for your patience, both with my fanboying and also with my delay in getting this video released. I interviewed him in March, and this was supposed to be out by April. Obviously, that didn't happen. I gotta say, even though the interview itself is a few months old, the actual video being released was delayed to now because of a number of factors. Some family emergencies, some personal emergencies. I needed to do some traveling, and also, of course, I work a lot. I have 3 jobs, so, stuff just gets delayed. So, I am sorry to Rob for this video taking so long, but I'm especially sorry to y'all that you had to wait so long for these answers. The only good news about it coming out now is that I get to release it as part of Project 618, which is my annual Gravity Falls video series, including videos that are just slightly shorter than my typical 2-hour plus Gravity Falls videos. These videos are a bit more on the low production end, so if you want to see things like, cool blacklight effects, costuming, lighting, etc., puppetry, check out the longer videos on my channel. They'll probably have something interesting in there. And without further ado, let's jump in. Here is my interview with animation icon Rob Renzetti. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. I mentioned this to you already, but I interviewed Alex Hirsch, but I gotta say, I'm a little bit more excited to be talking to you.
Oh no. Now I will disappoint you.
Oh, you absolutely won't. Don't worry about it. I'm just so excited.
Please tell me why I'm better than Alex Hirsch. I want to hear all about it.
Absolutely. I think throughout the DVD commentary of Gravity Falls, and also with my own conversation with Alex, Alex made it very clear that you were behind a lot of what Stanford Pines ended up being, especially with Journal 3. And I have a very extremely healthy 10-year obsession with Gravity Falls. None of my mental health providers are worried about it. Don't worry. And Ford is a big source of that obsession. So I have come prepared with about a million questions
All
about
right.
Journal 3.
I hope I'm prepared. I looked through Journal 3 for about 40 minutes before this, but trying to revive my memories of writing what I wrote along with Alex. So
No worries.
if I blank on anything, I apologize ahead of time.
That's fine. We had a few questions for Alex, and a lot of his answers were, well, Rob might have that. And so I knew I
Okay,
had to
well, we'll
talk to
see.
you.
We'll see if I do.
But I also really wanted to talk to you about Horrible Bag of Terrible Things because
Oh,
I read
good.
it and it's incredible. I love it.
Thank you.
It's like I don't know how you feel about people comparing your work to others, but it did come across as like fucked up Narnia meets Coraline with all of the wit of Lemony Snicket. It was
Thank you.
remarkable. I
Oh, those are
loved it.
huge compliments. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Yeah, I'm Lemony Snicket was definitely, I mean, I'm familiar with all those texts and they
Mhm.
are all influences, but I made my way through a series of unfortunate events kind of as a prelude to writing this book. Not because it was like, oh, now I'll rip it off, but just because I knew it was like a big text that had come out in kind of the genre that I was hoping to pursue,
Yes.
you know, a while back. I'm nothing if not behind on all pop culture by about 5 to 10 years. But so I listened to the audiobooks, which are mostly read by Tim Curry, which was a real pleasure.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a touchstone when I started the book. And in fact, I even had kind of a narrator at the start who was like breaking the fourth wall. But as I started, that lasted for like a chapter and a half, and then I kind of just dropped that and kind of went with the narrator who kind of like isn't all knowing, but kind of mostly knowing and kind of is very close to the Zenith in terms of his perspective, but not. It's not first person. It's not Zenith's. You know, Zenith isn't writing it. Some other forces. But Tim Curry, as doing the Lemony Snicket books, was definitely in my mind as a touchstone. So thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
Yeah, I'll just say one of my questions is actually about the narration because I don't usually listen to audiobook, but this was, and I think it was Jay Myers, incredible work.
Yeah.
It was one of my only audiobook experiences, but by far the best, but also
Oh,
just
I'm glad
on
to hear
its
it.
own phenomenal. I was curious what kind of process goes into picking a VA for something like that, and how involved were you?
Well, I was very involved in the picking of it. I was not involved in the recording of it.
Yes.
Which is remarkable because with very few exceptions, he got everything right. Which is no small task. But you know, I was giving them. They did auditions in New York, the listening library, Penguin Audio people, and sent me a bunch of finalists, and then I listened to those, and my wife is like my first reader and my sounding board and co-writer really in some regards sometimes. So we listened to them together. I had some strong opinions, but I didn't want to tell her what I thought. And we kind of both zeroed in on a few people, and Jay was among them. And then, you know, listening again a few days later, I definitely decided like it was really his narrator voice that really sold me on it. Like he got the narrator, what I wanted for the narrator, closer than anybody else by far. So it's like, this is it. I want him. He's the narrator. He sounds just like how I want the narrator to sound. And then I was kind of like, I hope he's versatile because there's lots of characters as he can do the voices and whatever. I didn't know how much I could ask for because I'm used to going to records with animation where you're in the booth with the people and you're like, if you've got a new voice, you got to come up with if it's a major character, like you do auditions the same way, like you do like a day of auditions. So like for Gravity Falls or for the stuff I've worked on, Teenage Robot Mina, like I would listen to like 15 Minas or 15 Jennies or whatever and think about it and ruminate on it and then come up with it. But like when you're in the middle of a series and it's just like, we need a new character who's only going to show up once. Usually you audition the person there and like you pick someone like who's versatile and then you say, this is the kind of voice we need. And then you find the voice together. And then as you're recording, you can make adjusts. But since I was just doing this remote and wasn't going to be there for the records, I kind of had to kind of guess. But gratefully, like he started sending in voices of the other characters. Like there was a text that they did as an audition where I heard the narrator, I heard his voice for Zenith, I heard his voice for Apogee, and like sometimes the stray human characters are the hardest thing for someone to get, right? Because there's no pushing, right? You can't push those characters as far. So I was really impressed with what he did with Zenith and Apogee because they're close, but you can tell the difference just in the voices, right? And he had a really hard time. We had a really hard time. I don't think I'm speaking out of school saying like we had a hard time finding Kriebel who was really important to me. And like his initial, that was the only time where his like initial take was off. It was still good, but it wasn't quite what I had imagined. And we like did, but he was so generous in that like he kept sending in versions. And I think on the third version, like, well, I kept giving him notes like, oh, over here, over there, but it was like, you know, it was like playing, it wasn't direct as it would be in the booth. So eventually he came up with something, and when he got it, I was in love with it. So like when we finally found it, I was like, now this is my favorite voice that he's doing. So it was a joy working with him. But it was a little different than what I'm used to in animation, which was very immediate. Like it's immediate, it's the day of, that's all you have. You know, you either, if you choose the person who's going to do the voice, they may not hit it out of the park, but he hit everything out of the park. Super, super excited and stoked about what he's done with that, and excited to hear the sequels as well.
I am so excited for the sequel.
Sorry, I rambled there.
No.
I tend to ramble.
That's fine. I do too. I'm glad I'm asking you the questions, because then I would be the one rambling and everyone would judge me. I'll say the performance of, I think, Muncie the scribe was my favorite. Just absolutely killed it. It gave me such Ian McKellen vibes. It was great.
Nothing I had in mind, but like just fell in love with it.
Amazing. I'll also say, so in the book, for like, you know, from the Schlarp to the great and holy worm to every variant of creature at the end, the eldritch abominations in this story have stuck with me for way longer than I thought that they would.
Wonderful.
And I'm a full-grown man. Did you have any difficulties in calibrating the story for the intended audience of, I assume, children and preteens?
I mean, it's supposed to be kind of the same target audience that I've been writing cartoons for, which is like that 8 to 11 middle grade.
Yes.
That's it's categorized as a middle grade book. I just kind of wrote what I wanted to write, and worried about whether I'd hit the target or not. I kind of left it up to the people that have more experience, which is my literary agent, and then when we went out to publishers, the publishers. And Penguin, you know, I'd written a whole version of the book. By the time I went to my literary agent and showed and got him based on the book, I think that was maybe draft 4 or 5. And then he had me do another draft. So by the time Penguin saw it, it was like draft 6. So pretty much the book existed, and they could decide whether they liked it or not. And they loved it. I didn't have any real notes. There's no, I mean, I don't know what the equivalent of standards and practices, which we deal with in TV all the time, would be for a book, but I didn't really have, there was no separate set of people. I just have my editors, and primarily my main editor is a woman named Alex Wolf. She goes through, gives me notes on every, it's going to be a trilogy. So on the I got notes on the first book. They give you like an editorial letter where they kind of type up a few, and then they go into the manuscript and like do track changes and say, what about this here? What about that there? But they loved the book from the beginning. So like, it was kind of like, I kind of set the tone that I wanted to set, and they said, yeah, we love it. And so they seemed to think it was appropriate for the age, as pretty much written. I didn't really have to take anything out. And in fact, in the sequels, she's made a point of saying like, it needs to be a little scarier. Like we need to be a little scarier here. So I love it. You know, you couldn't add, what else could you ask for from an editor, like except to like make it scarier.
That sounds great. And I bet it's a breath of fresh air, since working in children's animation for so long with the Standards Practice Committee.
I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was that I was like, I've done everything, I've collaborated with so much on everything in my life has been a collaboration in terms of entertainment for children. And I was like, I want to just kind of do this on my own and see what I can do, and see if it is viable. So I was very pleased. I was happy with how it came out. I was happy it got me a literary agent, and thrilled that it was published. It was just kind of all done on my own speculation. Like, I just want to do this. I set it as a personal goal. And because I've been writing Journal 3 and the other books I've written for Disney, it was kind of like, my idea was like, I want to have kind of a second career as a writer. Like, you know, I've been writing my whole career for animation, but that writing is kind of hidden behind the scenes, right? It's kind of, it's not front and center like it is in a book. So, so I was very thrilled to do the books with Disney, very thrilled to do Journal 3, and wanted to continue that kind of second career I'd set up for myself.
You know, even with all the eldritch abominations and all of the there were a lot of terrible things in that horrible bag. I gotta let
Hmm.
you know. Um,
Yes.
the thing that was possibly the most interesting to me and the most terrifying was Muncie the Scribe and Hugh the Seeker, and the permanence of the things that they wrote and the things that were remembered. I found it particularly touching because my day job, I'm a journalist. When you were writing that section, were you thinking about the way history is documented, the way journalism is documented, or any modern institutions of education?
Well, I can't say that I was, though, of course, as a reader, you're welcome to interpret it that way. I believe that the reader creates the story as well as the writer does, and that
Mhm,
things that, that for me personally, it was about that idea was about how we create our own narrative of our own life and
mhm.
how we think we remember everything, but what we really are doing is constantly rewriting the story of our own life.
Yeah.
And then memory is a tricky thing. And without spoiling the book for anybody who hasn't read it, that is a theme in the book.
Mhm,
That is like Zenith thinks he remembers things a certain way. He's off
mhm,
in that regard. So that was a theme. That is a theme, and it's something that I've as a personally is something that I've been very much aware. I'm very self-aware of myself. I have been ever since I was a kid.
mhm.
I always felt a little bit different. I was not good at sports. I was not what you can traditionally would think of as masculine back when masculine and feminine were much more rigorously defined. And
Yes.
that's a whole issue we're all going through now, and people trying
Yes.
to take us back to those rigid definitions, which I'm not in favor of because I personally never fit them. I was not interested in. I thought I should want to be good at sports.
Mhm,
I was not. I thought I should be know all about cars because my dad was a huge car fanatic. I did not. Remain a mystery to me to this day.
mhm.
I could tell you maybe one thing about an internal combustion engine. I'd probably get that wrong. Um, I I enjoyed being outside with my friends, but if I walked down the street and saw that they were playing softball, I was more than likely to turn around and go back to my house and spend the day playing with my Legos or drawing. And
Mhm.
that so that kind of introverted side of me is what led me to draw at a very young age. And so I've been kind of drawing and creating characters and writing stories for the characters for a very long time.
Mhm.
And now I've forgotten what the question actually was. Perhaps I've answered it in some way.
Oh,
But no, the idea that like the idea that like because I had those moments alone, I thought about who I was,
mhm,
what I was in relation to the other boys I saw around me, how I was different, what that would mean when it came time to fall in love with someone, to go out into the world.
mhm.
I've been thinking about that kind of stuff all my life and realizing that like you kind of define yourself in your own head and you look back as you age and stuff and you have more to look back at. Um, I've been with my wife for 30 years, so we have memories together and she remembers things better than I do. And so I have someone telling me like, no, you're misremembering that. That didn't
Mhm,
happen that way. So I know that memory is not, it's not a book. It's not something
mhm.
you can just flip back to the page and see exactly what happened. It is always something that we are adjusting and rewriting in our head.
Hey, editing Hannah here. I'm just jumping in to say that I'm about to ask a question involving spoilers for the middle of the book. There is a timestamp on screen if you want to skip it. So do that if you plan on reading the book. And if you don't care about spoilers or if you don't plan on reading the book, the only context that you need is that the main character, while in the fantasy realm of Grabog, meets Muncie the scribe, and his brother Hugh, who are these raven creatures that collect information from all over Grabog and then write it down. And while they try to be as accurate as possible, if they write something down and it isn't accurate, it ends up becoming true anyways. So one of the characters gets the information that this woman had a baby that was a ghost. And the brother doesn't believe him. He's like, no, that's not true. You're making that up. So writes about her other children, but does not write down that she had a ghost baby. Like specifically writes down that she had 2 children and not 3. And so if that baby does exist, it's now not real. And that's how they introduce this like very interesting mechanic that comes into play later on in the story. And it's left ambiguous whether or not the ghost baby did exist, so I asked Rob Renzetti about it. and that's probably context I should have given while I was talking to him. But you know, I'm not a good YouTuber. I'm pretty bad at this, honestly. Thank you for watching. My Patreon is down below. I will say, I know you probably left it unanswered and a little bit vague on purpose, but it is killing me. Was the third baby a ghost?
I don't know.
Oh man.
Probably not.
Okay.
I think Muncie probably knows his brother well enough, and I think Hugh does not. Hugh doesn't seem like. So I believe what Muncie said about Hugh is probably correct.
Okay.
That Hugh was
Interesting.
not really did not get a firsthand account of those things.
I
I
yeah.
I won't say that ghosts and spirits don't exist in the world of Grabog. They do, but not quite in the way that Hugh is presenting it in this story of the triplets
I see.
that's
Okay.
why Muncie decides it doesn't belong in the collectory.
That's fascinating. I thought it was so ambiguous, and the concept of the entire existence of someone being erased, just because it was written a specific way, was very
Mhm.
striking to me. But that to me was the idea of it, and perhaps I was thinking about it with my specific context and my specific lens.
Yeah,
But
of
that to
course.
me was horrifying. I was like, how could you do that, Muncie? You killed that ghost baby. Um,
Yeah, you can rest assured. I don't think that baby actually existed. So,
Okay. That
but
gives me ease.
doesn't mean that people that don't do actually exist can't get erased. So
Okay.
spoiler alert for book 2
Ooh.
coming
Oh man.
coming this July.
Can I put that spoiler in?
Sure, of course. I gotta
Absolutely.
tease people, get them interested in book
Of
2 and get them
course.
out there.
Yeah, then you'll get all their money.
That's right.
So I know that the Twisted Tower of Endless Torment has elements inspired by MC Escher. I think that is
Mhm.
so cool. I think it's also interesting because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't MC Escher's relativity the inspiration behind the quadrilateral confusion in Journal 3?
I mean, yeah, a little bit, yes. I
Okay.
mean, I'm a huge Escher fan and I love his stuff. It blows my mind. It's one of those things that you look at where, sometimes I'll look at another artist or read another writer and
Mhm.
be like jealous that I didn't come up with that idea and be like, because I feel like it's maybe within my grasp. I've never thought that Escher's artwork was anywhere within my grasp, either on a technical level or a mental level. Like he's just one of those people that I think is he's such a unique mind behind a
Mhm.
unique hand, right? So I love his stuff. So yeah, the quadrangle of confusion is definitely uh inspired by MC Escher as well. The
Yeah.
idea that like there'd be weird perspective stuff in the nether realm and the nightmare
Yes.
realms is something. I think that was one of my pages. I remember specific sections that I definitely wrote, and there's others that
Yes.
I'm like, did I write that or was that Hirsch?
I
So there's a
believe
little bit of
in the interview, the Mr. Shackleback podcast interview that you did, you mentioned that the whole Ford in a multiverse section was yours, that you
yes,
owned that.
yes.
And so
I
I
did, yes, I did all that and actually got a text one weekend after Hirsch had read it. And I saved that text because he was like, I love it. This is amazing. You did a great job. I'm like, thank you. um,
amazing.
I mean, Alex was very generous with compliments. It's not like it was, but during the run of Gravity Falls, the series, I never wrote it. I never wrote a script. I was behind the scenes on a lot of stuff, and a lot of the ideas were mine, but it was always the writers and then Hirsch who would put the final words on it. And so, occasionally a line them tour that I came up with getting, but I never really wrote anything. I never generated anything and wrote it down in that way. I
Mhm.
would generate ideas, but I never followed them up. So, him seeing me write was really in Dipper and Mabel's Guide to Mystery Not Some Fun, which I wrote with Shane Houghton, and then this, which we
Yes.
wrote together. So, uh, you know, I was pleased that he liked what I was writing. So it was a big deal that he liked that section. But I love that idea. I love the jumping around in different dimensions. And my mind definitely goes in that way. Obviously, with the horrible bag, I've created another dimension. I like other
Yes.
dimensions and weird worlds that have different rules. So
Yeah.
I loved doing that section. I loved coming up with silly, stupid, fun worlds that could frustrate Ford and annoy the crap out of him. Um,
Yes. I also noticed that was it Raggedy Albert? Is that the name of
Mhm.
the one who tries to turn Zenith into a doll? Spoilers, sorry. I'll try not to give too much away, and we'll move on to Journal 3 questions in a bit. I just really wanted to
I'm
give.
very pleased that you're talking about Horrible Bag first. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. So I wanna.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I need my friends to read it so I could talk to them about
Yes,
it,
you
and
do.
they haven't read it yet. So this is gonna motivate them.
Come on. Come on, everyone.
I noticed that Raggedy Albert spoke in Caesar cipher, or
Mhm.
at least I believe, and I believe it was. I didn't double check, but I noticed it because I could read part of it. You see, Gravity Falls rotted my brain, and I
I've
could
heard other people
partially.
say the same thing, like
I
that people can read
yes,
Caesar's cipher, they can
yeah,
just make it out,
yeah.
which is crazy to me.
I
Um,
it takes me hours to do my taxes, but oh, I got that on lock.
I didn't do my taxes. I pay someone to do my taxes. But it would take me a while to do Caesar cipher. That was definitely Hirsch's influence on me. I'm not a big code guy. That was all Hirsch. Like he did all the code stuff in Journal 3. I left
Yeah.
that all to him. But I knew having worked on the show how the codes worked. And when I got to the writing Horrible Bag, I knew like, well, not everybody's going to speak English in Grabog,
English.
though a lot of creatures do, because there has been interaction between the two worlds for a very long time. So they are familiar with English as well as other Furman languages. But I wanted Albert to just not be comprehensible. So like I thought like, well, we'll just do a very simple code switching thing. Caesar being the simplest of codes. And also I have Preble translate. So like if you don't have to go and stop your reading of the book to know what's going on. But I thought it would be a fun nod to Gravity Falls and a fun thing for the readers who are into that kind of thing to have like a little bit of a code to decipher and look up. But Preble basically gives you the cheat codes. He gives you all the answers for Zenith and the reader's sake.
I read it like after I was focusing on it, staring at it, trying to read it in my own brain, and then a second later I was like, oh, I don't gotta do this. I with Raggedy Albert, with that whole sequence of the concept of him turning someone into a doll. Alex Hirsch mentioned in my interview with him, and I believe also in the New York Comic Con 2016, that there was a scrapped tale of a doll collector turning Gideon into a doll. I also am reminded of the doll skin in season 1 of My Life as a Teenage Robot. I feel like that's a through line that's followed you creatively. Creatively. Were you happy to fully realize that concept finally in this book?
Yeah.
Like, I love that. And
yeah,
how long has that been in your head?
Since I was a kid. Hold on a minute. You may want to edit this part out. I'm going to walk away from camera unless everybody wants to see the sweet
Riveting
lower
television.
body that I'm about to show you. Hold on. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to find it, but I did. So this was in my home when I was a kid. This is not my book. This is my mom's book. My mom got this book as a kid. And this is one of the few things from my mom's own childhood. This was on display in my home my whole childhood. But I was sickly fascinated by these characters, by Raggedy Ann and Andy, because they're both cute and horrifying at the same time, right? Like, I find that to be the case. And I never really read the book. I just look at the illustrations here. Here's the inscription to my mom from her parents. It reads, "To our little Sue from Mother and Daddy, Christmas 1940."
Wow.
So, and it's weird because this handwriting very much looks like my mom's handwriting. I'm guessing this is her mom. She like wrote just like her mom did. But I just would flip through this and look at the weird illustrations, and I just was, I was just fascinated by this book. But I was too creeped out to ever read the stories. Here's some giant rat people, obviously.
Yeah.
So this was always in my head. So the idea of ragdolls, I've always been attracted to them and freaked out by them. So yeah, we did that, in Teenage Robot. It was inspired both by Venom from Spider-Man and from this stuff. So I knew, when I was just trying to think about things that could appear in Grabog, this just popped into my head again. And I knew that I could take it to a more horrifying level than I was ever to do on Teenage Robot. Yeah, and also because of Grabog is inside of a bag, there was definitely like tailoring and sewing. All those things are themes, like, because it's a bag that's patched together from different skins of different creatures. And
Mhm.
then in Grabog, there's actually seams in the world. It's kind of a patched together seam. So having a ragdoll seemed like a natural extension of that. So yeah, this has been with me forever. It's been with me forever.
I
And
see.
I'm so happy that it still existed. All that stuff from my childhood, like just was gone when I would go
Mhm.
back to my childhood home as an adult. And my parents are both passed away now. My dad passed away 2 years ago. So
I'm sorry.
thank you. I got this a while back, but after my mom passed away, but I'm just so happy to have this. This is one of my most prized possessions. I just also, this is a kick-ass, look at this kick-ass cover.
That
This
is
is
incredible.
beautifully done. The black, like this black behind it and the strong, it's like this is a very well art directed little book. I
Very
love this cover.
good
I love
composition.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
so
amazing. This is
cool.
amazingly strong composition and everything about it. I just love it. I love it. So but yeah, that's where Raggedy Albert comes from.
Amazing. I will say your books, the imagery in it lends itself so well to artistic renderings. Like
Mm.
after reading the description of the namesake, the horrible bag, the main
Mhm.
character, I wanted to make my own. I want to go to Goodwill and find different fabrics, different gnarly fucked up fabrics and just sew them together into a sack.
Yeah,
I
I
thought it
understand.
was incredible. I think my favorite piece of imagery was the God, I'm gonna forget the name of it, and everyone's gonna know I'm a fake fan. The the collectory, the
Yes.
tree-like structure at the center. I thought it was just incredible. I wanted to visualize it. Did you have any concept artwork while you were making it that you sketched out and drew yourself, or was it all just written down?
The only concept artwork I did was a sketch of Raggedy Albert and a sketch of Creeble, and those were more to help sell the book.
I
And
see.
I submitted those with the manuscript when my literary agent sent it out.
Ooh.
Um, and so those I did do a lot of sketching, but I'm a horrible background artist. I can't draw background. So to draw the collectory would be like it would be look very bad. But I'm
Mhm.
basically I think very visually. So I think that comes across in the way I write things. And sometimes I have to pull back on that. I'm also used to, writing scripts for cartoons where you have to, like, if you have like, well, you want the characters not just to be standing and talking, you want them to be
Yeah.
up to some sort of business. So I often find in my writing that I'm talking about like how they turn around and do all this. And
Mhm.
it's like when I go through and do like a second pass, like I'm doing on the third book right now, like a lot of that stuff just gets taken out because it's like that was just my thought process. But you really don't need to know that Zenith has turned his head from this direction to that
I
direction
see.
in the
Yeah,
book. It's just like he's talking. Just put the dialogue in. You can
I see.
eliminate a few words and get closer to the word count that your publisher wants you at.
Mhm.
Right now, I have to cut about 10,000 words out of the third book, so I'm doing a lot of that right
I
now.
see. I would be obsessed with an illustrated version of this book.
Oh,
It
me
would
too.
I would sell my soul for that. It's so the imagery you provided just with your writing is so fantastic, and
Thank you.
I would love to see it fully rendered by someone
I'm hoping there'll be
yeah,
some sort of visual version of it at some point, either an
yes.
animated. I can see it being a very good animated miniseries,
Okay.
because it's the book is set up to have some sort of cliffhanger at the end of most chapters,
Mhm.
or a series of movies, of course, and but even illustrated books I would love. MS Corley, the guy who does the illustration on the covers, I love his interpretation of the characters and what he's done with them.
Got it.
So I would love to see more of his artwork, but any kind of illustrated version, I would love to have it.
So I understand, of course, that you might not want to give away any spoilers or any more spoilers than we already have. But is there anything about Twisted Tower of Endless Torment that you want to share?
I'm sure. I mean, the Twisted Tower is in the title, so you're going to go to a tower at some point. It's called Eternity Tower.
Huh.
It is a prison. I will say one or more of our main characters ends up there. I don't think it'll be a surprise who probably ends up there, but the reason they end up there is because Zenith, when he returns to Grabog, is shocked to learn that he is now a wanted criminal. He is wanted dead or alive or eaten, as the signs around Grabog indicate, because of what has happened in book one, without spoiling
Mhm.
book one. So he is a fugitive from justice, such as it is in Gravog, which justice in Gravog is as distorted as you might imagine. A touchstone. There's a one of my favorite scenes in the book is a courtroom scene, and that is very much inspired by Alice in Wonderland and the crazy nonsensical courtroom scene in that book. So that is a little bit of a taste of what goes on. There's lots of other stuff that happens, but that's a little bit of a taste of what it means to have a twisted tower in the title. So we see some of our favorites. We see a bunch of new characters, especially in the tower. There's a bunch of interesting prisoners that in Zenith encounters. So I love it. I really enjoyed writing it. I think it's a worthy extension of the first book, and the third book will be coming the year after this. So I'm in the middle of writing that right now, and enjoying that quite a bit as well. I think
And you wouldn't be willing to share the title of the third book, would you?
I can actually. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can. We just decided on what the title is, so I don't know if
Ooh.
I'm allowed to. And I think Penguin wants to have some sort of announcement for it. So, um, I cannot tell you. I'm very tempted to tell you, but I shall not.
You can. I won't stop you.
I know you won't. That's why I've got to stop myself.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.
So I'm gonna move on to some questions about Gravity Falls and specifically about Ford
right.
and Ford's
I'm ready.
character.
I'm warmed up.
I remember hearing you say in a different interview that you were table cast as Ford when you were going through the script.
Right.
The nerdy scientist brother to Alex's counterpart, I believe you
Yes.
said. And I know that there were a million iterations before reaching the canon design and characterization of Ford. I know there was like a stuffy scientist type, a more hippie-esque type. From all of those different iterations, what was your favorite? What was your favorite Ford that never was?
I mean, I don't know. Those Fords are also just basically left they never really got off the drawing board. They didn't really speak to me. I mean, I think I can't say I don't think I have a favorite of those. My favorite is the one that exists, maybe because so much of me is in it. And let's just say I have no scientific ability whatsoever. Science was my worst subject in school. I'm not a good scientist. But that kind of the kind of persnickety accuracy before tact is a phrase that comes up a lot in my household. That's something that is a fault or a feature of mine, however you want to look at it. That kind of aspect of things. The idea that like Ford would ruin everything by having to correct Stanley's grammar in the middle of
the
a
apocalypse.
crisis.
Yes.
Yeah, that is very much I'm very much akin to that.
To be fair, his grammar was wrong.
That's true. It is. Ford was right.
Yes.
Ford's usually right. The question is being right the most important thing at all times? And it's hard for me to realize that sometimes that isn't the most important thing. But no, I don't really. Hirsch has probably got, Hirsch has got a million versions of everything in his mind.
Yes.
For me, I consider the possibilities and then decide on something, and I leave the things that have not been used I kind of discard them. Not that they go away forever, because they can always be reused for something else, but I kind of I don't worry about them the way Hirsch does. Hirsch worries about the path not taken all the time.
Alex Hirsch brought up that there were a lot of different versions, and sometimes in his head they get a bit muddled together. And there was something I talked to him about that I would love to talk to you about. In the DVD commentary, there is a moment in Dungeons and More Dungeons when Ford says something along the lines of, "This infinity die is incredibly dangerous. That's why I keep it in a cheap plastic case." And Alex says, I actually don't know about that line, because I think Ford is more practical than that. And I believe you say, no, he would absolutely do that. While watching, I found myself very much agreeing with you. Like, yeah, of course, Alex, what are you talking about? And I brought this up with Alex, and Alex said that he remembers all of the different various versions of Ford and the one that they landed on. And he said, that was essentially what he said, that you are Ford. rationalizing things in that. And that's what Ford does. He rationalizes things. So I guess I wanted a double question here. I would love to hear more about your thoughts on Ford's recklessness, Ford's rationality when it comes to the reckless things that he does, because we don't even see this guy use any. There wasn't even like a fence up in front of the portal. I don't think this man ever uses lab safety equipment. But also, did you and any of the other writers or Alex ever disagree about aspects of Ford's character, either while writing the journal or while writing the show?
To answer your first question, or your second question first, not really. I don't remember a lot of arguments when it came to writing a journal at all. Um, part of the joy I had of writing journal is I could write anything, and I know Hirsch was going to take his pass at it and change things if he wasn't pleased with it. So part of my joy is that a lot of the stuff that I wrote appears intact in the journal. Like he shifted very little. Usually we just add extra jokes or add extra things into my pages. But very little got changed. So that's a joy for me, as you know, hey, I like to get the compliment of seeing my stuff go all the way to print. In the show, I'm sure there were. I mean, these discussions are a long time ago now, and I don't remember exactly. But I think that's the case with any characters. You're kind of finding them. You find them in the circumstance you're putting them into, right? So you know, every show starts. Ford wouldn't have been in the Bible, but there was a Bible for Gravity Falls. There was a Bible for my show. These things exist before you actually put these characters in motion. So you say, like, in order to sell the show, you're telling execs like, hey, there's this character over here, and they're kind of like this, and they got this friend, and they are kind of like this, and they butt heads in this way, and blah, blah, blah. And it's all not BS, but it's all theoretical, right? It's all like, I think this is the way it will work. And then writing an actual episode, putting them in the specific circumstances, it's a completely different thing. Usually your character is not going to change and go 180 degrees in a different direction, but sometimes they do. Like when I first came up with Tuck for Teenage Robot, in the pilot he's kind of fearful and whatever, so I was like, oh, he'll have all these phobias and whatever. In the first episode for the show, he's afraid of Ferris wheels, like, right, or whatever. But like those phobias kind of just fell to the wayside, and what ended up happening is like he's just kind of like, he's the wild card weirdo funny character, and you never know how he's going to react to something. Sometimes he'll be very brave, sometimes he'll be a total scaredy cat. That's what that ended up being, right? Once when we start putting the character through his paces. So I'm sure on the page and in Alex's head, Ford was one thing. And when we started actually putting him into circumstances and having him react against the other characters, he became something else. I think at first he was just like, he's in opposition to Stanley. He's in opposition to everything that Stan is. You know, he doesn't like Stan's lying. He doesn't like Stan cutting corners. So he wouldn't do those things. And I still think in Ford's head, he never cut corners. All the things that are reckless, that's based out of his own ego, which is in his head. He's like, I'm the smartest person I know. I'm probably one of the smartest people on the planet. I've got this stuff under control. I've got it handled. I'm never going to abuse the 14-sided dice or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to put it away and lock it away because I know how to handle it. And I'm not going to let anybody else handle it because I don't trust anybody else. Right? Like, I only have to take I don't have to take certain precautions because I'm the only one who's going to be involved with the portal. You know, and okay, Fiddleford's going to be there too, but like, he's my assistant. You know, I control him. You know, in the story in the journal is the fact that like you're not going to. He's another person. He's got his own agenda and stuff, and you can't control him. And instantly, you know, Ford pushes him away because of that, instead of trusting him, because he doesn't trust anybody. Right? That's his issue, is trust. He trusted his brother when he was a kid, and that fell apart, and he's never trusted anybody in the same way since. Fiddleford's come the closest, but even there, there's a breaking point. Like, no, you know, like the minute Fiddleford challenges him, it's over. You know, it's like, you don't challenge me. Like, and that's because he thinks he's right about everything, which is, you know, one of his flaws is like, he can't see that he is fallible, because he hates the fallibility he's seen in his brother growing up. He can't stand how fallible Stan is. He doesn't want to see that in himself, even though it's there.
Something that I thought was done very well. And you know, this is one of my favorite parts of the show, was everything related to Ford. I'll just say that. everything that Ford did, every mistake he made, you could string it to something that he experienced that made me go, I feel like I'll say this. I feel like in similar situations to what Ford went through, I very well might make a lot of the same mistakes.
Of course.
The the idea of not trusting anyone stemming back to his teenagers with Stan. Because if I was in Ford's shoes and I had told Stan, yeah, I have this big opportunity, and Stan was like, I don't know, but you're saying that if it doesn't work out, we'll be okay. And then it doesn't work out. Yeah, I would also think the exact same thing that Ford
Yeah.
did. And I could also understand how that could shatter something because they really only seem to have each other growing up. That they were each other's only connection. You and Alex used the word ego a lot, and I do agree that to some extent it definitely was ego, but I also think that this is in-depth character analysis with a subjective point of view. I'll
Yeah,
say
of
that.
course.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that what we see of Ford growing up in a low-income neighborhood without a lot of opportunities, and then he finally gets an opportunity and it gets kind of snatched away, so he has to work twice as hard
Hmm.
in a low income college trying to make it in the late 60s, early 70s. And we'll talk about the timeline. I have so many thoughts about the timeline. And but getting PhDs or at least one PhD in itself is difficult.
Hmm.
All of that. I like personally, when I was in college, when I was in university, I had a job. I had two internships and I had full-time classes at the same time. Of course, I feel like the idea of not trusting anyone and of really being ambitious and wanting this project with the portal to work out, wanting glory. I don't think it's just ego. I think it's also um this ambition, this need to succeed because you had to work so hard for those opportunities.
Yeah.
And I found it so relatable on that level. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I love the way that you could find through lines, intended or otherwise, in Ford's character and the way that he acts in future.
Well, I mean, thank you. There's not a really question there, so I'll
Yeah.
just say that, like,
Just talking.
and that's fine. I enjoyed listening to you, and I think you're very intelligent. Yeah, I saw a little bit of one of your other videos. I thought your analysis was great. And this is what you hopefully do when you write something or create something, is that you leave it universal enough that people can see their own lives in it and draw their own conclusions and draw conclusions that you didn't yourself have in mind. I think all that's valid, and I don't disagree with you. I will say, like, yeah, like I think Ford thinks like, well, what was all that hard work for if not this, right?
Mhm.
If this doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
And the answer I would give him is like the work is the reward itself. You know what I mean? Like I remember early in my career when I was talking to Gandhi Tartakovsky, my friend. We went to school together, and when when Dexter became a series, and then that series led to another series for Gendy, and I saw him work his ass off and work late every night, and I said, the reward for hard work is more hard work. You know what I mean? For good or for ill, the work is the reward itself. Like, so, if you're not enjoying it, do something else. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the accolades, if they come, they're way down the line. So, and they may not come. Here we have a cat.
Yeah.
Cat'll humble you.
Oh.
Cat'll humble someone when they're getting verbose. But anyways,
Absolutely.
I think Ford is thinking, like, what is the point of all the stuff I've done if it doesn't lead to something grand?
Mhm.
I think there's validity there.
Yes. So, with an actual question, I need to ask. I asked Alex if there were any excerpts or cryptids that got cut from Journal 3, and he said that there were probably around 12 pages that were cut for space, and that he didn't have those, but that you might.
Oh, I might. I don't have them. I can't quote from them, but I can. I'll be happy to send you a message and give you some information on them if I can
Absolutely.
find them. If I do have them, I probably do. I've kept a lot of the process documents on all this stuff somewhere. So I'll try and hunt them down for you. But I don't the whole the cryptids was definitely that was more of Hirsch's domain. I did some of that stuff, but he like, you know, he's the one who came up with the platypus and all the other crazy characters. Those are mostly his doing.
I'm just gonna jump in right here and say that Rob did email me back, and while he did check and he did look for those pages, he wasn't able to find them. It is yet another Gravity Falls mystery, even though he didn't find them, and that is a bit of a bummer. Thank you so much for checking, Rob. Seriously, I appreciate it. And who knows, maybe one day they'll turn up somewhere. You mentioned that Alex was the one who came up with all the codes. But I guess my question is, do you know who specifically was behind any of the illustrative codes or illustrative little details like the symbols or the red rectangles? I know that you had illustrators like Andy Gonzalez, Stephanie Ramirez. Do you know who specifically might have been behind some of those elements? Because
I mean, I
have a
know
lot
that
of questions about it.
Andy is the one that set the look of the journal for the show. So
Okay,
any of the pages that you see that are like from the show, those are definitely Andy generated that stuff.
got it.
Um,
Okay.
and I think Stephanie followed him up and might have done that kind of similar stuff on the pages she did. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't remember how the extra illustrations were divvied up. I think they were just kind of spread between the two of them. So I don't know. But Andy is the one who evolved the initial look of the journal along with Ian Worrell, the art director. I think Ian probably had
Yes.
some input into that, but it was mostly Andy's baby, and Andy is superstar.
Okay.
So yeah, it would have been Andy who generated that kind of general look of the show, and it would have been me going through those pages and looking at like the version of the, you know, of zombies or gnomes and going like, okay, what do I do with that little red squiggle in the corner? Okay, that could be text, I guess. What
Mhm.
should it say?
Yes.
I did a lot of that work on the existing pages where I'm like, okay, there's gonna be a bit of a narrative, but some of the stuff's just gonna be random and random jokes and like,
Mhm.
okay, what do I have right? Okay, I'll figure that. You know,
Got it.
I'll make that squiggle into this joke.
Were there any pages that were from the actual series that were a particular struggle to work into the actual book? Anything that tripped you up?
Mostly it was about where they should go. Because I don't know, I've told this to Alex, I don't know if he would have shared it with you, but what I did initially when we got the gig to write the journal, was I went through every episode and screenshot
You did say
whenever the
that.
journal
Mhm.
appeared, and I put it up on a board.
Yes.
And I like figured out like where in the book is the zombie page that we see in the first episode. Where is, where's the, we know what the first pages are, but after that it gets ambiguous. And thank God it does, because our own inconsistency gave us a degree of freedom when we constructed the journal that we could like roughly put the zombie page somewhere in the first half of the book. The first pages, Dipper opens the journal and flips through the first pages. Those got to be the first pages. But then he starts flipping beyond it, and we're like, we can get away with that stuff. So the ambiguity, and like there's some pages like the zombie page shows up many times, and sometimes it seems like it's like 2 pages in, and sometimes it seems like it's like 20 pages in. So like that was what we needed to shift things around. As far as the text goes, like the Gremlin page was a problem because
Yes.
we had a joke where there's this dumb water joke and a
Yeah.
page turn. So
Yeah.
I think I'm the one who figured that out, and now that would fit into a larger narrative. But like Alex did like how we led into the Gremlin page, like how it was part of this journey that Fiddleford and Ford took, and like how they encountered the Gremlin. He did those pages, then I took over the actual pages that appear in that episode and wrote some of how that would work and how we would make that transition work. But that otherwise it was just kind of like, what's the narrative going to be? Because we wanted to tell a story. Because one version of the journal would just be like, here's a page about gnomes, it's talking about gnomes. Here's a page about zombies, it's talking about zombies. But Alex didn't want that from the start. When we first started talking about Disney Publishing, he wanted to tell more of Ford's story than we could tell in this series. So we very much had in mind that we were going to tell a story about Ford. And I made a point when I was doing anything with the pages that existed, I wanted to make sure Ford was in there as a character, that it wasn't just like, and now Ford's going to tell you about ghosts, but it was about Ford interacting with ghosts. I did the ghost section, like where we went through all the different ghosts. Those are the characters I came up. Those are the biggest intensity, the biggest concentration of characters that I came up with. I came up with what, that ghost one was a Casper ghost.
Yeah.
That ghost level 2 was basically the nasty ghosts that used to torment Casper. And that, there's going to be a Freddy ghost. There's going to be, ghosts from Ghostbusters are going to make an appearance.
Phantom Bustifiers.
Phantom Bustifiers. That was Alex's joke. He added that in. He added that into my text, but otherwise I wrote that page. That's what he would do. He would like add the dumb the dumb puns and dumb fake movie titles into things. But like I made it a narrative about Ford and like him going away to Manly Dan's cabin or whatever, and making it into a story, not just a list of different creatures.
Yes.
That was kind of our goal for the journal, and I think that makes it more of an interesting experience for the reader. This also makes the text really small because we both overwrote.
Small and in cursive. A dyslexic person's nightmare.
I know. We're really you really gotta love the show to read this book. But
we know
we know the fans are out there. They would suffer through.
Yes. What you said is interesting because there are pages of Journal 3 that don't even work unless you assume that they were written on some level out of order. For example, the Bill Cipher page over here, when he's like, Bill is the most trusted, great guy ever, and then he scribbles it out and is like, Bill can't be trusted, he sucks. That only works in the page that it is because it's after Bill's betrayal. If hypothetically he wrote out the sentence Bill is wonderful just so he could cross it out for dramatic effect, which one is a fun interpretation. I almost want to believe that that's the case, but it makes more sense to think for some pages that he just opened to a random page and wrote something down, at least for a couple of these excerpts. So you guys definitely had some wiggle room. I had one of my videos was going through like all of these post-its that you see here are things that have some kind of date associated with them, like Phantom Bustifiers, that would be Ghostbusters, what year did that come out, etc. And trying to come up with essentially a find what year this took place, as well as a few other things. And there are some, I told Alex this, there are some places where I could tell that you intentionally really had an idea of where you wanted it to be and when you wanted things to be. And there are some elements where I'm sure they were accidental. For example, when Dipper is describing Stan and Ford's, but Stan's bar mitzvah, he happens to work where they would be 12 in 1964 when Sharpies are invented. I know y'all really thought about that.
I'm glad it all worked out.
Yes, and I told Alex this and he looked stunned. So I'm sure it was intentional completely. Y'all really thought that through. I'm glad y'all busted out the Hebrew calendar for this. That's amazing.
I will say the only thing that I contributed was that I knew that it had to be it had to be during certain years in the 80s that the events took place.
Yes.
In the early 80s. And that was as close as, and I was the only one who got it that specific. And I don't remember the details now. I know back at the time I was telling them like, this happens now. This has to happen.
Yeah.
This has to happen and within this time period because this happened in this time period, and this is how it all works.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing I zeroed in on. I'm not Jewish. I don't know anything about the Hebrew calendar. So
I'm not either. I just did a lot of Googling.
Well, I mean,
yes.
you did it.
Yes.
I didn't do the work.
Yes.
Nobody did. We were very lucky on that show. We did a lot of stuff by the seat of our pants that we were actually able to make work.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I thought it was
Bill was smiling down on us, is all I'll say.
Absolutely. Something that did strike me as very intentional was that the Great Flood that killed the lumberjacks happened in 1863.
Mhm.
Which, if you go forward 150 years, when the curse of the lumberjacks was set in place, sets the show in 2013. And that was
Mhm.
really one of the things that I really clung to. It made sense. Um, we get this vague timeline, and I think that part of why it worked was because they'll had a very strong sense of setting and of the characters, and I think that
Mhm.
when you have a strong sense of these things, other elements fall into place. And I just wanted to commend you on that, and tell you that it was just incredible to go through. I will say it only makes sense if I ignore some of the jokes. Like Phantom Bus of Fires makes no sense because that would have been well after 1983.
I mean,
So
well, I don't know what movie you're talking about in the real world. That Phantom Bus
exactly.
Fires can come out anytime we want it to.
Exactly. That was the rule I set, was if an actual name, like if Ronald Reagan is mentioned,
Well,
hypothetically,
sure.
then I stick to that.
Yes.
If Carl Sagan is mentioned and Cosmos is referenced, I stick to that. But if I don't know when Phantom Buccaneers came out. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I was able to have a lot of wiggle room. The thing that actually helped set it in my timeline, the events happening right after January or during January of 1983 was one, the January 17th page when Fiddleford is like, please stop this project, I'm begging you. And also the fact that Ford mentions the song, in the Blacklight edition, he mentions the song Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by the Eurythmics, which came out early January 1983.
Yep.
And I know you didn't do the Blacklight edition, but it
I
all
didn't.
makes sense. I
Yes.
connected the dots. It was great.
I'm
So
glad. I'm glad it all worked out.
what figuring out um the present day, the 2013, like the Dipper and Mabel pages.
Hmm.
Um, the timeline needs to be stretched in some places. A lot of fans have noticed that. For example, Seuss's birthday doesn't land where it is on the show. Like in the show, it's shown to be, I believe, July 13th. And the way that it's written chronologically, it can't land on that page. Did you have more difficulties because you had some set in stone idea, because you only had 3 months to work with instead of all of
Right.
the early 80s? Did you have more difficulties with timing out and spacing out the Dipper and Mabel pages?
A little bit. I mean, we tried to keep things roughly how we showed them on the show, but I think we fudged some stuff and wiggled around a little bit. It was less difficult. It was more the biggest challenge on that section was just like changing the tone and like
Mhm.
going from this kind of super serious while still being funny, like this person who takes himself, I mean, Dipper takes himself too seriously, right?
Mhm.
So there's the link, but Ford is like, involved in all this operatic stuff. And the adventures of the kids are necessarily sillier. But I thought it would be a nice break for the reader to kind of take a breather from all that and go and kind of just give them different angles and different views of stuff that they saw. You saw most of these adventures, and give
Mhm.
them a little extra stuff like the whole experience with the Larry King waxed head in the in the bowels of the Mystery Shack.
Yes.
That was something I wrote, and I thought, like, I think it was something Hirsch had thought about in like wanting to have done that in the show and not being able to figure out how to fit it in. And I'm like, well, I think that'd be great. That'll be great, like few pages in the journal. So
Mhm.
let's do it. Um, because the other thing about this, so the other thing that gave us freedom, but which also was a huge challenge, was that like we knew the journal, the the printed journal was going to be so much larger, and though we had the pages from the show, there was so much more to do and so much more to fill in.
Mhm.
So we had a lot of room, and there was points where it was like we just need to come up with ideas to fill the number of pages we have. Um, and that was the challenge. But like that was also the opportunity to do fun stuff like an extra adventure with Larry King's head.
Was there ever anything that you wanted to put into Journal 3 that didn't quite fit because of the audience or because of Disney standard and practice? The sequences I'm thinking about specifically are like the multiverse sequences, because
Hmm.
before Journal 3 came out, I always figured they were maybe this is just a fan and me wanting things to be specifically dramatic for fan fiction and things like that. But I pictured what Ford going through would be so much more of a torment, especially because we know he was being hunted down by Bill and Bill's goons that entire time.
Right.
So was there ever anything that you wanted to put in that you ultimately pulled back on because of the intended audience?
I don't think so, but I mean, I'd have to look back at the unfinished versions of things to
Okay.
see. I don't think I mean, again, like, we wanted things to be fun. So like, I think there are definitely more traumatic worlds that Ford visited. We just didn't put those in. I would have loved, I mean, I could have done a whole book on we could have done a whole series on Ford's adventures in the multiverse. Like, in fact, I think we actually talked about it at some point, doing a spin-off. You could do a spin-off, easily do a spin-off series of Ford's adventures in the multiverse. And this is back before multiverses were like, everybody, let's all do multiverse. Let's have everybody's gonna have their multiverse now.
You guys inspired Marvel. I think that's great.
Maybe, who knows? But like, multiverses are a concept we didn't come up with, but like, I love doing that stuff. I mean, the whole M dimension was going to be was a dumb joke that we were going to try and make a whole episode out of it. It just didn't work out. So like, I was like, I'm not letting that go to the wayside. I want to do some version of that. I want to do some version. It was going to be Mabel going to the M dimension, but
yes.
I wanted to do something like that. I really did enjoy writing those pages because it was just like a free pass, like, come up with some stuff. It's nothing that we experienced in the show. So it's just expanding the canon and doing stuff that's just like whatever, and I was like, if Hirsch doesn't like it, he'll cut it out, and so when he was really pleased with that section, I was very gratified, and it was very exciting to see all that stuff. Because again, like the thrill of this kind of book, even though we're linking everything together, like the concept only has to hold up for a few pages. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to dive deep into the logic of the M universe and find how it doesn't work. It's just a series of dumb gags, and you will be through it in a couple of pages. So don't worry, don't think too hard about it. Just move on. And I definitely loved having Ford be frustrated at how stupid some of these places were and be like, this doesn't make it. Why does this universe exist? It doesn't make sense.
I absolutely love that section. Something that a lot of the fandom found some level of fascination with was the Oracle and the lore behind the Oxalotl. I feel like I'm not pronouncing that right.
I think that's the old pronunciation. I don't know what the new pronunciation is.
Oh man, I gotta figure that out.
Someone else was like, "This is how you pronounce it now," and I'm like, "Okay, but I'll never remember that."
Fair. Something interesting about the Oracle. You and I believe Alex has also mentioned that the Oracle is intended as a kind of lost love possible, like a romance thing. I hate to break it to y'all, but there are thousands of shipping fan fictions for Gravity Falls on Archive of Our Own, the biggest fan fiction website on the internet right now. And of those thousands of shipping Gravity Falls fics, exactly 2 of them are Ford X Oracle. This is not a ship that caught on. People,
that's all right.
Yeah, I feel like the majority of
caught on in my head.
You wrote those 2.
That's right. It's good. I mean, look, Ford could have multiple loves. He's gone to multiple universes.
Of course,
this is just one that might have been someone he could have been happy with. But please tell me more.
It's fascinating because like there are more ship fics for there's a one-off joke in the comics about Ford, and I know you didn't write the comics, but when Ford mentions that he dated a siren once, there's a lot of fics about Ford X Siren, and all of those siren fics, by the way, are he's a male siren and Ford is gay, and all of them. I think that Ford fans we tend to fixate on the elements of Ford of feeling ostracized, not really part of society, feeling on the outskirts. It's the X-Men idea, where these differences are representative of something that we find relatable, and in this case, queerness being part of the LGBTQIA plus community, which I know wasn't necessarily intended. But I do find it fascinating. This is the only instance I could think of in any of the fandoms I've interacted with where a ship was proposed by the writers and completely ignored. Um, just completely
I'm sorry.
sidelined.
I,
Um, I,
I'm not hurt. I'm not hurt by it.
I,
That's okay.
I think that's so funny. I wanted to bring that up because I've never seen it happen before. And I just wanted to let you know that that's an anomaly. That what you've done, I've never seen before in
I'm
anyone.
glad to have done something so unpopular.
Was the Oracle page yours, or was it Hirsch, or was it a combination?
No, it was, I think it was, I think I started that page and then I think he probably came in and wrote some stuff in there. I haven't read it in a long time, but yeah, there been, I mean, there was also the idea that originated with Alex was the idea that, Ford had the opportunity to live a more normal or regular life. And a life where he did trust somebody, where he made a connection and he was constantly turning away from that.
Yeah.
So, what he did with his brother, what he did with Fiddleford, he did probably multiple times in the multiverse, where there were places he could have settled down and lived a legitimate life. But he was too set on the fact that Bill had thrown him off course, that Bill had betrayed him. That was something that he couldn't let go.
Yeah.
And that he was going to have to, that was his whole direction, was to get back there and fix things for
His
selfish and non-selfish reasons. He didn't want
Yes.
Bill to be unleashed, and he didn't want Bill to get the better of him.
His relationship with Bill is so interesting because it has a lot of the hallmarks of like an abusive partner in a way, where
Mhm.
Phil is telling him, like, Fiddleford, I don't think you can trust him anymore. And eventually that seed kind of sits in Ford's brain, where he writes it in code a few times. My muse thinks that F can't be trusted with this, or my muse thinks that F can't quite handle the truth. And it begins kind of seeping in there. And it very
Yeah,
much read to me almost like an abusive friend or an abusive partner, in a way where Bill is purposefully having Ford distance people, which
oh,
is
for sure.
already falling, like, it falls in line with Ford's own proclivities since what
Mhm.
happened with Stan. Like, he already has that proclivity to do it. But Bill, like, I think a lot of abusive friends or partners or any kind of abusive person in one's life kind of plays on those insecurities and it really
Sure.
emphasizes them. And despite, I think, now, and this isn't a question, I'm just rambling now. But
Ramble
this
away. I've done my share. It's your turn.
it's my turn. This despite Ford's, I think, maybe righteous cause of wanting to rid the universe of Bill. I think in a way, Bill has in a way so much emphasized that proclivity for unhelpful behavior, or it's self-destructive. And
Sure.
I think that that's so cool. Did y'all have any thoughts of making Bill kind of this like abusive friend, abusive mentor when y'all were writing him?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's probably, that's there. I mean, nobody, when we see Bill in this series, he's never really trusted by
Yes.
anybody, right? He's not trusted the way that Ford trusted him. For all of Dipper's inferiority complex when it comes to Ford, like he
Mhm.
never fell for Bill's BS.
Mhm.
And I think again, it relates to Ford's ego, that he thinks like he's so special that an interdimensional muse is going to pick him out of humanity to mentor and to help him discover the secrets of the universe,
Mhm.
and his grand unified theory of weirdness, all that kind of pretentious stuff. Like Ford doesn't trust anybody, and yet he trusts this crazy interdimensional being, maybe because
Mhm.
he's not human, he's something that Ford can look at as somehow superior or beyond man, and he strives himself to be beyond man, to be more than man is, and because of his extra finger and the fact that he's an outsider and strange.
Mhm.
So I think it's there. I don't think it was ever like really talked about out loud or anything like
Yes.
that, but it definitely factors into things. And yeah, I mean, one of the biggest conundrums in the journal as it's written is how can we write these pages and still have Dipper read this book and like not know all this stuff, and the fact that
Mhm.
we'd say like, oh, some of the pages are gone, now they're restored, like
Mhm.
again, like magic comes to the rescue and saves us. But yeah, no, that's one of my favorite parts of the book, is the extrapolating the relationship between Bill and Ford, and getting to get more insight into that and how it all works. I love the pages after he's realized that Bill's betrayed him and he's kind of just
this one.
paranoid. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's amazing, right? But the idea when I think I wrote these pages when he goes to the diner and he's like he seems to be seeing Bill everywhere.
That is my favorite section, the paranoid era
Yeah.
of Ford. It's my favorite. I love the way it's written. I'm curious, who wrote the scribble page? Who drew, I guess, this page out?
I think that was Hirsch. And I think he might have actually sketched that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, we wanted to kind of blow things out in the middle and kind of make it,
Yeah.
everything's been so controlled, right? And Ford's so like you got this miniature, like
Yeah.
sometimes too small cursive writing and all that very, very,
Yeah.
and then like to get to that page, you can see like you can kind of read the emotions on the page. Like that's just like rage, right? That's just like rage and sorrow and betrayal and everything. It's great.
Speaking of Ford's paranoid descent.
Mhm.
So I know you did not work on the Blacklight edition, that you didn't work on the special edition.
I wish I had, but no.
That's what I was gonna ask, because if you have worked on the Blacklight edition, is there anything that you would include in your fan canon of the
No,
Blacklight?
I can't. I would be making it up here if I said there was,
Okay.
because again, I knew I wasn't going to be working on it, so I didn't
I
really think beyond that. And I was curious to see it as much as anybody else, and really enjoyed going through it. Of course, I enjoyed seeing the caricature of me as well.
Yes, the Grim Reaper.
I am the Grim Reaper. You didn't
Yes.
know, but I am the Angel of Death.
That's how I know you.
You'll see me soon enough.
I believe it.
In that incarnation.
I'm stressed enough. I believe it.
But no, I can't say that I do have anything in mind for that. But yeah, I mean that's tricky, right? Because you can only do so much and trying to fit it in and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that again, I'm just thrilled there's a Blacklight edition, and I actually got to have a couple of them.
Oh my gosh, it's my prized possession. Just
Mine's on display. I have a shelf with one copy of all the books I've written, and that one's you're just seeing the spines of most of them, and in the corner I have it facing forward, so you get to see the fancy cover and all that.
I'd be terrified of my cats ruining it. This one tends to just get his claws on everything I love.
I hear I got a pet rabbit and he eats everything, but this is too far up for him to reach.
I used to have a pet rabbit. He passed away a few years ago. His name was Chiami, and he was my baby boy. So yeah, no,
I've had 3 rabbits and they've all been delightful pets. I love them.
Yeah.
I love rabbits.
He
My wife had a rabbit as a kid. Oh yeah, they love chewing. You got to give them stuff to chew.
Yeah,
you don't give them stuff they can chew, they're going to chew stuff you don't want them to.
Yeah, like computer cords or my clothing.
My rabbits have all been pretty good about cords. We keep them away as much as possible, but they've not too bad. But we give them good stuff they're supposed to chew. This our current rabbit, Digby Flopwell, he will start eating the living room carpet. We got to watch him for that because that's not good for him. But generally, he's a pretty well-behaved boy. Our first girl rabbit, Angel, she had a pair of jeans which were her art project, and she just chewed little holes. By the time she'd passed away, they were like a new creation. A pair of jeans, just like little diamond shaped holes all running up all and down them.
Yeah, put that in a frame. It's art. It's constellations. Exactly. Did you ever put thought behind what Stan would have thought reading parts of the journal? I know that we have this blanket of, well, some parts are ruined, some parts are faded, but Ford says some things in here about Stan specifically, and I'm wondering if you ever thought, what would Stan think when he reads this, if he did?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's not something I thought about. I'd be curious. I mean, I don't know if Stan only has, how long does he have journal 3-4? Because he grabs it from Dipper.
Yeah.
I mean, you know better than me because you've done all this timeline stuff. I don't know how long he has to read it, or how much how often he would have had a chance to dig into it. I think he's probably very paranoid about having it and afraid that Dipper's going to see. Like I don't think he's. I don't know if he really had a chance to dig into it. I think I think he would just confirm all the things he thinks about his brother, right? All the that his brother didn't respect him, and that his brother thought he was nothing more than a schlub, a con man, not worthy. I mean, to me, that's why I love the end of the journal and them reconciling, um, um, all that stuff that we didn't have a chance to fit into the end of the show. Again, like we had the opportunity in the journal to kind of linger on those moments more and to have the two brothers reconciled in a more full manner. Um, I mean, to me, I mean, really, Stan's life has been sad and lonely. He really, his brother was his best friend, and he loved him so. And I don't think any other relationship ever worked out for him because of what happened between him and his brother. He's lucky that Dipper and Mabel came to visit him for the summer because they are instrumental in healing his life and bringing him and his brother back together. But some of those entries by Ford talking about his brother, Stan would probably he would be pissed off, angry, curse his brother, and then,
Continue trying to save him. Yeah.
well, but then in like in a silent moment, being like, that's fair. Like he'd be like, yeah, that's right. He's
Makes
not wrong.
sense.
He's not wrong about me. He didn't have to write it. He didn't have to write it down, but he's not wrong.
He didn't need to write it in his scientific journal
Yeah.
slash
I mean, well,
diary.
why is that in here? I mean,
Yeah.
like saying I have excessive body odor. Who needs to know that? Just keep it to yourself.
Yes, I do love that journal 3 is equal parts diary and scientific journal.
Mhm.
Something that me and a couple of my friends have clocked is that there are parts of it that are very much like emulating a scientific journal. Like they say like figure C next to an image or something, but there's oftentimes not a figure A or a figure B. There's just a figure C.
That's right.
And also like he talks about his childhood crush on I think it was Kathy Crenshaw.
Mhm.
Like this is his diary, and it's my favorite thing.
I think if you saw Journal 1 and Journal 2, they'd be more together.
Oh yes.
They'd be more straight.
Yes.
But like at this point, he's just relaxed into it and it's kind of like just using it for whatever occurs to him. I mean, I'm not surprised there's not like a grocery list
Mhm.
on one of the pages or something. You know what I mean? Like
I
they
mean, he does a
probably should have
reminder
like,
to return a library book.
yeah, I mean, exactly, right? So like,
Yes.
like pick up your laundry, like that kind of stuff. Is just using this for everything.
Yeah, there is a couple of specific lines I wanted to ask you about. And actually, speaking of the library book, the date, I'm trying to find the exact, yes. So it says on one page, return library book 8/11. The date was different in the show. Was there a reason for that?
I don't know. No, probably
Yeah.
not.
I love that.
I
Okay,
don't know
cool.
why that changed. I don't remember that. I don't think I had anything. I didn't have anything to do with that. That's her. She made the
That,
mistake. No, I
that's
don't really remember that.
that's perfectly fair.
There's no
And
reason for that. No, like that's the thing about Alex and all his codes and secret hidden messages and whatever. You think everything means something. And
yeah.
that's the beauty of setting up your fans to think everything means something, because like some things just don't mean anything.
That's the thing that makes me so annoyed when someone's like, "You're over analyzing a children's cartoon." I'm like, no, they want me to. They asked me
Well, yeah,
to.
we do.
They put
We're
backwards
inviting you to
messages in
overanalyze.
there. Yes.
Yeah, I mean that was Hirsch's genius to get
Yeah.
the fans involved in the show to that
Yeah.
extent. Look, one of the reasons I wanted to work on the show is because I
Mhm.
saw the pilot and fell in love with the characters and the idea and thought like Hirsch he's got this is gonna be great. This is gonna be a great show. I want to be a
Yeah.
part of it.
It has the same fan-fueled mystery elements that Lost did, only the ending is better.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I mean, that's damning us with faint praise, but no, yeah, no, Lost kind of fell apart there, didn't it?
A
I was
little
huge.
bit.
I loved Lost, but
I
just
loved
like,
it too. I'm
but
still an apologist for the ending. I don't think it's as bad as people think it is.
well, I think the problem was is like they felt like they had an ending and people figured it out, so they had to change it. Like we knew where we were going with Journal
Mhm.
with the ending. If people figured it out, we did everything we could to like, including the whole Fiddleford fake out, like to push people off the scent. But like if
Yeah.
people figured it out, they figured it out. We know the story we want to tell. We're not gonna change it because some fan somewhere figures it out. Like 20 years ago, we would have never known that. And nobody else would know it either because the internet didn't exist and like people couldn't talk to themselves,
Mhm.
to each other the way they do now. Like, and like, so what if someone figures it out? Like there's other smart people in the world. It's like, that's like the whole thing is that's becoming like Stanford, like being like, I'm the best and nobody can approach me. Like, yeah, no, there's lots of people that know story and understand how things work. And they may figure it out, but like some people, it's going to be a huge surprise. And the people that figure it out, they'll still enjoy it. Like they'll
Yes.
enjoy being right. So like,
Hmm.
don't change the story you're going to tell because some people figured it out and you got to be the cleverest kid in class. Just
Hmm.
tell the story you want to tell. Tell the story that's right for your characters. And like, if someone figures out the ending, so be it. Like there are things that will be revealed in the second book 2 and book 3 of my series. And if someone's figured it out, one, I'll probably never know about it, and two, good for you. I
Yes.
I gave you clues. The clues are there. You can figure it out. If it's a stretch, but the clues are laid there, so you
Hmm.
can figure out the twists if you want to. But if you think about it deeply enough, but if you do, kudos.
Part of the traveling through the multiverse section was the better world AU, where Ford
Hmm.
realizes that he's become uh, a huge science superstar, everything he's ever wanted to be.
Yeah.
I have a few questions about this world. I asked Alex Hirsch for his head canon. There was a section of our interview, you'll see, where I asked him head canons, not canon, head canons. That way he
Yeah.
felt less pressure in saying something, and also gave some leeway to fandom, because I do think sometimes fans get very stuck on what the creators have to say at the risk of ruining their own fun in the sandbox. So
Yeah.
this is also, by the way, anything I ask you as well, like feel free to consider it headcanon. So I guess I wanted to know what headcanons you had about the Better World AU, and also what happened to Stan in that universe after he took Journal 3 and hid it somewhere in the far reaches of the
That's a good
world.
question. I don't know. I don't think about these things. I write what I write what needs to be written, and then like, it's not that I wouldn't enjoy thinking about them, but like then I move on to the next show and I got to use my creative energy to come up with stuff for that.
I see.
But I like all the stuff you're talking about. Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to pursue that. Like, what is Stan? I think maybe I'd like to think that Stan gets his shit together. Not that he comes back and that him and Ford are reconciled. Probably that never can happen, but probably that he extracts some price from his brother, especially when his brother becomes a success. That like Stan gets set up in some way, like,
Okay.
and that Ford is maybe happy to do it. Like, like
Okay.
it's more transactional. Like, well, you hid the journal for me, and Stan's like, unless you want me to bring that back and unearth that thing, how about a little daily allowance for your brother
That's a
here?
pretty good
A weekly
stand.
allowance. Yeah, that's like no. That's what I used to read Stan sometimes in the
Amazing.
scripts too. So yeah, I mean, why not? Like, like maybe Stan opens his own a different mystery shack somewhere else. Who knows? I was I don't know how much. I'm trying to remember how much of this is headcanon and how much actually exists. Like there's part of me like, but like he was a rival to Bobby Renzabi. Like he became a successful rival to
Mhm.
Bobby Renzabi and started his own kind of like, you know, buy this through my television commercial, like a successful venture like Bobby Renzabi is doing, with
Mhm.
lots of different products sold through the television.
I see.
I don't know. I think Stan in that world is probably doing better than Stan in our world does until they're reconciled,
Awesome.
because he can hold something over his brother's head.
So this is related to my life as a teenage robot, which I've been rewatching. I only got through season 1 of my rewatch before this interview, but I wanted to re-immerse myself into the world. I somehow
Thank you.
like halfway through the theme song, I realized I know this song, and I didn't even think I remembered the theme song because I haven't really. I'm not gonna pretend I've engaged with it completely over the years because I
That's fine. It
haven't.
was not a success when it was on the air, so I don't expect
It
people. A lot of
should
people
have
are
been.
familiar
It's
with it. Yeah.
incredible.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
It's incredible. I will say though, and I know that you've talked about this a little bit on Twitter. I was struck by how many elements of trans subtext could be found in
Hmm.
Jenny. Like
Hmm.
literally the first thing she says to her mom is, "I changed my name to Jenny. It's not XJ9. Call me by the name I choose."
Yeah.
There's attempting throughout to pass as a real girl,
Hmm.
and how people respond to that based on the varying levels of success that she has with it, especially with that like that doll suit that she
Hmm.
puts on, um and seeing the way society interacts with her as a result. It is it's fascinating. It's especially cool considering I know that you've said on Twitter that while you welcome those trans headcanons, they weren't intentional, and you don't want to pretend that they were.
Right.
Um, between Jenny and also Stanford, Stanford Pines, there's so many elements where fans pick up on it and go, this feels like a nugget of truth is in there, a nugget of trans or queer or gay
Mhm.
experiences in this. The queer coding, incidental or not, is off the charts. And I guess I wanted to ask you, as the artist behind, or at least partially behind these characterizations, um, how much of that do you think, or rather, do you think that this is just a new part of fandom where teens and people who grew up without this representation are seeking it in the things that they love? Or do you think that there is, how do I phrase this? Do you think that there is something about the characters that you like to write that lends itself to these kinds of headcanons?
Uh, well, let's say yeah. Let's say yes to the second part of the card. Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. I already talked about like how I struggled with my identity as a kid, as a boy, and what it
Mhm.
meant to be masculine back then, and what you were supposed to be knowledgeable about, and what you're supposed to be good at. And
Mhm.
I mean, I think generally you're talking about the struggle with identity, right? Which, I'm straight, I'm cis, I'm white. I've had it easier than anybody in our culture to struggle with my identity, and yet I still struggle. Growing up. And that struggle, the struggles I went through gave me a strong sense of who I am, and I've had that
Mhm.
strong sense for a very long time. But I can imagine what it'd be like to bring gender and all the things that go along with it into the mix, because that was never a struggle for me. I always knew I was straight. I never thought like maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm bi, maybe I'm in the wrong, I've been identified wrong and I'm trans. And then that not that the concepts, some of those concepts were up there. I can't say that trans was out there when I was a kid. But at least I didn't encounter it. But still identity, like every human that's worth their salt, who I would want to know, struggles with their identity and on some level. And like I said, it's much easier for me than the LGBTQ community. But those, to me, that's a universal struggle. Like, who am I? How do I fit into the world? Who do I want to be with? Who do I want to love? Who are my people? All these are questions that people struggle with. So, and it really comes to fore in your teen years, right? It really comes, that's what you are literally changing. You see yourself changing. Like, yeah, when you're a kid and you go like, I'm 5 and now I'm 6 and I'm so much taller than I was when I was 5. Like, but then when like it's like, why is there hair down there? Why is this? What's happening to my voice? Why
Mhm.
is this part of my body gotten huge and the other parts are like, what I'm becoming this weird monster in the middle of like when you're struggling with all that. So that's where Jenny is located, right? She's been designed to be a teenager. How horrible for her. Like, you know what I mean? How
Yeah,
horrible to be stuck in those years
it's a
and have to
shame. Yeah.
struggle with all that stuff. So I never trans never entered my head. It never
Mhm.
I can't say that it did. But I'm not surprised that it's something that is there, that's coded into the character
Mhm.
that trans people see, that they see that representation. Now, are people, so in my case, yeah, the representation wasn't meant to be there, but it's there. You know what I mean? It's not, I created it. It doesn't matter what I intended. I didn't never, and this is what I said on Twitter. I don't subscribe to the idea that like, as the creator of something, you are the final interpreter of what it means. The whole point of creating something and putting it out in the world is you want other people to interact with it and engage with it, enjoy it, see something of themselves in it, see something valid in it, see, not that you're telling lessons, it's mostly meant as entertainment, but like entertainment resonates and means something to some people if it's relatable. If you get into, like, you can tell there's plenty of shows out there that are fun to watch and you never really care about the characters or you never identify with the characters. But to me, the things that I've enjoyed the most are all character based, the meaning that like the humor, the stories, they proceed from who the characters are. So in that kind of entertainment, you want your audience to be invested in the characters. So yeah, I'm very pleased that the trans community has embraced Jenny as a character and that they see themselves in her, because it means they've enjoyed the show, and I've had some level of success in communicating something that can be universally identified as part of the human experience.
Absolutely. I think it kind of stunned me upon rewatch how um I would say stronger and more positive the representation, however unintentional, is a lot better than a lot of canonically trans characters and queer characters that I've interacted with in my time of consuming television. And so that struck me as really interesting, and I think
Thank you.
that's fascinating.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the show. Jenny's awesome. She
Yeah.
just doesn't realize it. She doesn't realize how cool she is. And the fact that she's different from everybody is the source of her strength. And part of her journey is supposed to be that she becomes comfortable with who she is and what she is.
Mhm.
And not that she's not that like it's not valid to try and change herself or to move. She grows the way that just the way that she grows is she grows to realize
Mhm.
that she's got some great stuff about her. And you know, the Escape from Cluster Pine movie was kind of like that's kind of like her, that's where she realizes like you are now on the world where you can blend in, you can be just like everybody else. You're a robot, everybody in this world is a robot. You can live a normal life here. You can be normal. And she still chooses to be a superhero.
Mhm.
She still chooses to go out of her way to help people, to save the other robots when they're in trouble. She becomes a superhero on Cluster Prime. Like this is who you were meant to be. This is not only who you were designed to be, it's what you want to be. You are given the freedom to be something else and you still choose to be this. So this is part of who you are, Jenny. And she comes to realize that. So, that the show, from the show's perspective, my perspective, characters in the show's perspective, Brad and Tuck, they think she's awesome.
Mhm.
Sheldon thinks she's awesome. Her mom thinks she's awesome, even though she criticizes her all the time, but she's criticizing her for falling short of what she's capable
I'm gonna try to do some speed run yes or no
of. Okay,
questions.
I'll be quiet.
Um,
I'll be quick. Not quiet,
um,
but quick.
this is absolutely fine. I've loved the answers I've gotten so far. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
For the Search for the Blind Eye website that launched between season 1 and season 2. Do you know anything about that?
I mean, no, that was Hirsch's baby, but it was
Hirsch was behind it. I don't think that's
I
ever been
think maybe I don't know. I was assuming he would be behind it. I
the
assume
instant backtrack of
honestly, I assumed it was something. I don't really know. I know nothing about it, is what I should say.
see. That was
But
a
I think
question.
I think that might have been generated by Hirsch.
That was one of the
If he
questions we didn't get a chance to ask
if
because of time.
if he disavows it, then I disavow it on his behalf. But I think that was probably meant to just keep interest up because we knew we were gonna have a long time between season 1 and season 2 because it took us so long to create these shows.
Amazing. I mentioned Journal 3 cut pages or cut concepts. Do you have any similar concepts for Dipper and Mabel's Guide to Mystery Nonstop Fun?
Yeah, but those are pretty silly. It's a much lighter book and nothing so crazy great that it's worth talking about. And I can't remember it honestly. But again, I have the rough pages for all that stuff, and I would know what the concepts were. But they're pretty silly. And most of them are just like dupes of ideas that we did.
Down the line.
Yeah, or in the actual book itself, like, these kind of pages are both similar, and this is a better version, so let's cut the other one. I don't keep all this stuff in my head. I can't remember it all.
That's fair. For I know that the Book of Bill is coming out.
Yeah.
And I know that there's going to be at least advertised some Lost Journal 3 pages.
I haven't heard that. So if you're asking me a question about it, I have no idea about it.
Yeah, I thought I saw it in the description, I think on Barnes and Noble. So
that's a cool idea.
Yeah. Well, my question was going to be, did you have any involvement at all in Book of Bill? And if not, is there anything you want to see in it?
I mean, there's plenty I want to see in it. I only am involved in that. I was Hirsch. I was among the people that Hirsch turned to bounce concepts off of in terms of basically the general concept for the book. And this is typical Alex. He had like 5 different kinds of beginnings. Like, when we were doing the show, I don't know how much he talked about this with you, but like he'd often be like, okay, Alex, your version of the script is ready. And he would show up to like the part where we're supposed to read the script together. And he'd be like, well, here's script A. And at this point we go into alternate script B. And he would be like, I don't know which direction to go. And he could never, you had to like really hold his feet to fire for him to ever settle on anything. He'd be like, well, I really like this about this, but this has got this. And we'd be like,
Mhm.
we have to produce the show. We have to decide which one do you like better? We got to decide. And you'd be like, so he did the same thing with the Book of Bill. Like, well, there's this direction and there's that direction and there's this. And I'm like, I know I'm not going to be able to tell you go with this. So I'm like, this is what I like from this version. This is what I like from here. This is what I think is strongest. So the version he came up with, I don't know. I'm the same as any other fan. I'll be reading it and discovering it along beside the rest of you. But I did talk to him about some concept at the beginning. I would love to have been involved with it, but it didn't. He wrote this one on his own, so I have no idea what actually ended up on the page.
I see. Is I assume the answer is no, so I don't want to push it. But is there anything you want to share about Book of Bill that Alex might have bounced off of you?
Oh no, I mean, like if I shared anything, it might not be there. It would be
I
it
see.
could be a
Okay,
lie.
that's fair.
Everything I saw was potential. Unless I was the potential Book of Bill. So not what of it ended up on the page?
Mhm.
Perhaps none of it. I don't know.
I see. My
Bill
next.
Cipher will appear. I'll share that.
Wow, you heard it here, folks.
Yeah. The
Uh,
Book of Bill, that refers to Bill Cipher.
whoa.
You might not know that.
Amazing.
Yeah,
My next
you're
question
welcome.
is, thank you so much for the scoop. I've noticed that on Twitter, you're a lot more accessible to fans. Like when fans have questions, they're always happy to answer them if you see it. You've actually answered a couple of my questions before on Twitter. I've asked you about various codes, and my question is, do you find it more difficult or increasingly more difficult to be that accessible in the online climate that we have on Twitter these days? Are you a little bit more hesitant to have that interaction these days?
No, I'm not hesitant. My Twitter, I know Twitter has become worse,
Mhm.
but my experience, my curated version of Twitter is still very pleasant. Um, if I dip into the politics there, I don't involve myself in the politics. I figure, I got my opinions and I keep them mostly to myself. But like, I dip into politics on Twitter, and if I see people that I don't like, I get a real joy out of blocking the assholes on Twitter. But I mostly follow artists and writers, and those people are great for the most part. So my version of Twitter is very nice. And yes, I interact with the fans of mostly some Gravity Falls fans, mostly Teenage Robot fans. In fact, I'm telling a new Teenage Robot story
In your
um,
newsletter, right?
in my newsletter.
Yes.
So I often am promoting that on there and promote the Horrible Bag and stuff. So my version of Twitter is still very pleasant. So um, you know, and I have the freedom to not answer questions if I don't feel like it. Nobody knows whose tweets or questions I'm seeing, so when I have a moment and when I feel like it, or if I feel like I have some value to add, I will answer, I will interact with the fans, but it gives me joy. So I still have a good time on Twitter, though I know generally it's gone downhill, and I hope Elon Musk will sell it soon and get the hell out of everybody's way and make it a better place again. But I'm there till it go. I've mentioned this before. I'm the last person on the Titanic. I'm there till it goes all the way underground. Because it's the only social media I'm any good at, and I'm not going to give up the skills I've acquired.
Last question, which just kind of a wrap-up question. Do you have any questions for me? Or is there anything you are begging someone to ask you about so you could talk about it?
No, I mean, no, I don't. I'm sorry to say.
That's fine.
Um, uh, you know, I'm very pleased that stuff that I've worked on, my own stuff, Gravity Falls, other stuff that people are still interested in and want to talk to me about it. Um, it's a joy for me that Teenage Robot isn't completely forgotten because, you know, the world I lived in when it was on the air, this kind of stuff had just started, and it would a show that doesn't do well just kind of falls into obscurity. And now the obscure is more current than it should be in terms of because we have this one sometimes wonderful, sometimes horrific world of the internet where we can interact in a way we never could before. So for me, it's been a joy to talk with fans about the stuff I've worked on in the past, as well as I can remember it. without prompting, without going back into the files and remembering all the stuff that I've forgotten. It's just a joy to interact with someone like you and someone who's knowledgeable and who loves this stuff enough to really dive into it and to investigate it on a macro and a micro level like you have.
Yes.
So it's just been fun talking with you about it, and I'm pleased to do it. If you want to talk to me again in the future, I'll be happy to come back and talk about some other aspect of Gravity Falls or Horrible Bag or Teenage Robot or whatever you'd like. Usually I have a good time, and you can see I have no problem talking.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
It
for
was
your
a-
time. This has been
You're,
amazing.
you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
So that was the interview with Rob Renzetti. Again, it was an absolute joy to talk with him and to ask all of these questions. Just such a cool person to talk to. And for those of you who are still around, I have some good news. If you're watching this video on the day that it's set to be released, June 4th, then there's a very good possibility that a behind the scenes video is actually going to be up tomorrow on my Patreon. The behind the scenes is going to go over a couple of things like how I made this backdrop, how I made this print, how I got to interview Rob Renzetti in the first place. I kind of just asked and he said yes. Can you believe it? That same video is actually going to be a behind the scenes for the Alex Hirsch interview, talking about how I made those backdrops and how I made the puppets. You know, the puppets. I had to make puppets for that video because I wasn't able to use Zoom footage like I was for this video. I will say this, I'll give you this behind the scenes tidbit for free. I was strongly considering making a Rob Renzetti puppet and then just like having it behind me and not using it. I thought that would be the funniest thing in the world. Honestly, it would have been. I should have done it, but I just didn't have time. I don't even know if I'm going to get this video out on time. The editing is going to take enough time, let alone making a whole ass puppet. But also, then I would just have a puppet of Rob Renzetti. I already have a puppet of myself and a puppet of Alex Hirsch just in my home. I can't do that. I can't just be the puppet guy. I'm turning into Gabe Benson. What am I supposed to do with this? I just have this now. Tell me in the comments what I should do with this man. Kobe. But, puppet or no puppet, I want to once again extend a thank you to Rob Renzetti for taking the time to chat with me and for listening to me go on and on about Stanford Philbrick Pines, who, frankly, has ruined my life. And, of course, thank you for watching. Hopefully, if I'm able to keep to a freaking deadline on time, you will see me next week with a new video. But until then, this is Hannah, signing off. All of the different versions that went into making Ford has been... Oh, 1 second. My cats are about to kill each other.
Oh, don't kill each other, cats. Come on now.
Talk to me. Hey. I see you doing it. He's like, his paw
matter.
is like outreach, like about to slap the other one, and then I'm like, hey, and he's just looking at me.
It's like waiting for you to look away. So
yeah, it's
continue.
like I'm a velociraptor in Jurassic Park. Like, I can't see you if you don't move. No, I'm witnessing this.